Do you really believe that I'm the emissary?
I guess I always have. I never wanted to admit it to myself. It's hard to work for someone who's a religious icon.
This planet is Kobol, the birthplace of mankind, where the gods and men lived in paradise until the exodus of the 13 tribes.
It's real. The scriptures, the myths, the prophecies, they're all real.
So say we all.
Good day and welcome to Battlespace 9, Episode 13, featuring Deep Space Nine's Destiny and Battlestar Galactica's Kobol's Last Gleaming, Part 1. I'm Carl, and here are our guests.
I'm Karen.
I'm Liz.
Welcome back, Liz and Karen.
Thanks.
You were on our pilot. Now you're back to talk on Part 1 of the two-part season finale of Battlespace 9. We're doing the finale. It's the end of Battlestar Season 1. And then I'm gonna take a couple of months off and sleep. But if you like what we've done, please tell your friends. We're very Twitterable and YouTubeable. Also, you should give us a rating on iTunes and other type of things. It's my dream to someday see Battlespace 9 when you look for Battlestar Galactica podcasts before it starts throwing up podcasts for The Office for some reason. That's my dream. We have Liz and Karen back. How have things been?
I mean, it's all right.
Cool.
I want to say that there's been there should be big, huge news, but there's still, it's working remotely. Yeah. And I had a burrito for dinner. It was amazing.
I had pasta. I'm pretty sure it was less than a week old.
Woohoo!
And I hooked a bunch of balloons to my lazy boy chair and sailed around the world.
Oh, see, that's the dream right there.
How has theater been? What's new at Gender Swapped Star Trek?
Gender Swapped Star Trek will be coming back to Aresia once again for 2023, Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend. We will actually have two different performances at Aresia. The first one will be to reprise the episode from that we had initially were going to put on stage for last January in 2022 before the convention got canceled, and we moved it to a live stream performance instead. But we want to, we want to put it in front of a live audience, and like we originally intended. So we will be reprising "City on the Edge of Forever," and sort of to counteract that gravitas and it's a multifaceted selection process, seriously considered with a whole bunch of different factors involved. And I assure you, I come to this decision with all seriousness and consideration, and yet I don't know how it happened. But we're doing Spock's Brain for 2023.
Oh,
it's gonna be so good.
Oh boy, that's like flipping an entire world right there. Wow.
We're gonna yes.
It's gonna be
critically acclaimed episode balanced out with the reputed worst episode of
the
TOS.
opposite of that. It'll be great. You'll get to watch me cry both episodes, but for completely different reasons.
I'm definitely looking forward to whatever your brain box thing looks like.
Brain. What is brain? It's gonna be such good dialogue for Karen. I'm so looking forward to hearing her say it and making her say it.
Oh gosh.
Are you directing, Liz? Or
I am. I'm in the process of adapting the script for our live radio performance. We've gotten the band back together, and we're gonna be holding auditions soon, and then we're gonna jump into rehearsals and see what ends up on stage. She said confidently.
The theme of today's episode is prophecies. 2 episodes of prophecies. And the first one is Destiny, in which Vedic Yarka comes into Sisko's office, warning of doom. Cardassian and Federation scientists are trying to build a communications relay through the wormhole. but Yarka believes that an old Bajoran prophecy foretells that the Cardassians will use this opportunity to destroy it. The Cardassian scientists seem nice, but when a weapons blowout prevents the Defiant from destroying a comet that has wormhole sealing material and is on a direct course, it seems that the prophecy is coming true. It turns out that the weapons were sabotaged by an Obsidian Order operative fingered by the Cardassian scientists. Sisko and Kira solve the problem by generating a protected field from a shuttlecraft, accidentally fulfilling the prophecy in a different way. Sisko is intrigued. Maybe there's something to this emissary business after all. What did you think of Destiny?
I enjoyed it more than I remembered enjoying it in past watches. Especially because I am a sucker for world building, and I thought that this was sort of a nice, somewhat lower stakes sort of world building window into Cardassian, not like Cardassian culture and politics and what might be going on back on Cardassia, just based on the dynamics between these three Cardassians we meet.
The diplomacy is pretty interesting in this episode.
I enjoy the Cardassians so much. I enjoy that they are, in fact, the bitchiest race of aliens in the entire known galaxy, that their form of, like, flirting is mansplaining. Like, just everything about them is so slimy and punchable. They're all so punchable. I love them so much.
Punchable. Nice.
Karen loves a
mean
punchable
that in-
face.
I've never heard the Cardassians described that way, but it totally fits.
I mean, punchable, it's a high esteem for me to
Yes.
want to
Oh, I
punch
know.
you in the face.
Oh, I know exactly. Yeah.
Karen also flirts like a Cardassian, apparently.
No, I flirt like a Klingon, excuse you. I will throw rocks at you while you recite poetry at me. That is how this would work. And I'm just saying, ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to recite poetry to me, I do have rocks. No, I really did enjoy the Cardassian ladies. I did find that their character design, like their makeup, was interesting, because one of the overarching sort of like memories I have of, like, say, even like Gul Dukat, like, is they've got those big cobra like neck
Bridges.
they're in, like, they've got struts just supporting their heads, and the ladies don't. It's very less pronounced in that. And I'm wondering if, if that's more of a, well, ladies are just, like, softer in general, we need to make them more graceful and feminine, or if it's because they're not quite as rigid in their understanding and appreciation of the world. Like, because the Cardassian ladies kind of, they're okay with moving on and not holding on to the past quite so much.
Galora she really looked like a original series Trek alien to me, in a good kind of way. And Ulani just looks like a nice Midwestern aunt Cardassian. like she was gonna come out and bring, like, bars and punch for everybody.
Yeah, I would totally chill with Ulani.
Yeah.
We'd be at the bar at a conference,
How do they strike you as scientists? I know you both interact with a lot of scientists.
Oh God, I work in academia. They struck me as very believable in terms of, it's one of those things, like, the constant struggle that Star Trek has with monolithic cultures, right? And in this case, we're seeing a subtle break from the monolith. Gracious and chummy, and that still puts me on edge because my brain is like, but they're Cardassians, what are they up to? But at the same time, if we take them at face value, it's completely believable that, of course, the academics that show up are less rigid in their thinking and less nationalistic. Taking that Cardassian vibe over, comparing it to the Soviet, like the Cold War, end of the Cold War vibe. We definitely saw the scientists, the academics, you had, like, they were working for the state, not necessarily by choice.
Yes.
And going to a conference, doing international research, all that sort of thing. For a lot of them, that was like a great way to escape, whether it's temporarily for an assignment or for a conference, or to actually defect. There's these are worldly educated people who tend to be more open to other cultures and might not be as rigid and nationalistic. So, like, when Dejar shows up, it's an immediate red flag. Though not necessarily. I mean, you definitely had those kind of thinkers within the same community as well. But it sort of immediately offsets her against the others.
It's kind of like the movie Arrival, where it's like just sort of understood that this is a story between like 25 nations who are all pooling their scientific endeavors. And, I guess that's what scientists do, and militarists do the other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's always that's the common uniting, cause and belief in their field. I work with a lot of election experts. Those party lines are not nearly as polarizing among election experts as among the general population. They will regularly get together across the political spectrum. I mean, the most extreme outliers, not necessarily going to adhere to that, but every election they're getting together and they're going to agree upon the most concrete fact because that's what they're looking at in front of them. And they have
we should all be doing, says Karen, who works in elections as well.
It's definitely made me a more informed voter, that's for sure.
What do you do in elections, Karen?
I am that little old lady who crosses your name off when you go to the polling location. The one who hands you the ballot.
You're a judge.
Yeah.
Oh, good deal.
Here we're election officers. We don't.
Okay.
I don't think
Officers.
where we are like that. That's like the term. But yeah,
Sure.
I've been doing that
Makes
for about close to 20 years now.
Excellent.
Oh.
It's a little weird. The primary we just had was probably the first time I was the oldest person in the room working the election. Which is exciting. Well, I mean, it's not exciting that we lost a bunch of workers because of COVID and all of the older people were afraid to come out. But the fact that there are younger people coming to step up, now I'm not the anomaly. So, so get vaccinated. Call your local election
Guaranteed
board.
they can use the staffing, especially with the uptick in enrollment the past few years. My town got redistricted. We went from having 16 voting precincts to 27.
Whoa.
So I was double clerking for my location, as Karen got to coach me through that because I've only been working as an election officer for the past since 2020. I think I started.
Excellent.
And it's rewarding and important work, but it can also be a little stressful.
Yes. I'm sure it can. My hat is off to anyone who works with the public right now. especially in medicine, in politics, and in restaurants.
Oh my God!
But I'm pulling us off topic. We have to get back to the topic, which is prophecies. There's some damn prophecies in this damn episode. This is, of course, an interesting episode for the emissary. He has been refusing the call of emissary for like 3 years now. What do we see Sisko do?
I mean, he denies it. He's a skeptic. He's always been an interesting figure in that he's a non-believer in a position that is very much at the center of the believer's attention.
I enjoy the fact that throughout this episode he's like basically seeking counsel from pretty much everyone.
That's true.
So I mean, anytime you get to see Sisko and Dax interact, it just makes me so happy.
They are good, aren't they?
I love Dax so much. But yeah, I mean, he turns to Dax, he turns to Odo, he turns to Kira. Like, he's looking for advice from everywhere. And I mean, it makes sense, right? He is this important religious figure in a religion that is not his own. So not only does he not know how to work, but I mean, now you're faced with the idea of, predetermination. And so does he have to make a choice, or will that choice get made for him? Or is his inactivity the choice? Like, you just fall down that wormhole.
No pun intended?
Pun not intended. I'm very proud of myself.
I mean, I didn't even think about just the concept of predetermination. I mean, sometimes it does come to mind just because the prophets / wormhole aliens, they exist in all times. Like they experience all time at once. The fourth dimension is just for them. So predetermination coming into that in terms of things like prophecy, in terms of divining the future. For them, it's just they're just looking slightly to the left.
Right, and this is Kira's point, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought that conversation was pretty interesting.
I especially loved the fact that she is a devoutly religious person, and yet is not so blinded by her own faith that she can't talk about it with Sisko using his terminology. Like the fact that she refers to them as the wormhole aliens and doesn't seem like the slightest bit like insulted by that, I think is very interesting. It's such a weird line. She walks such a weird line, and she does it very well with like impeccable posture that I can only hope to like fractionally emulate. But she's such a cool character that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's by necessity. Because she's in such a unique position, literally, not literally, I guess, with her impeccable posture, but just by being an administrator of DS9, she's the lead authority figure of the Bajoran government resident on the station. But Sisko is her colleague, her co-leader, and her superior officer, in depending on how you're looking at what angle you're looking at. And he is not very much not Bajoran in every which way, so she has to. There's a diplomacy that she's been forced to get used to doing, even though Kira is not by nature a diplomat. She's a chihuahua in a red suit.
It's interesting about I think that's right, Liz, but I also, we've seen Kira make a lot of friends, sleep with a lot of enemies.
It's true.
Metaphorically. And I realize, I wonder if that sort of comes from like just plain being in the resistance and just having nothing. But then when you find an advantage, you push that advantage however you can.
I think that's
and like whether that be a Cardassian with some misgivings about the occupation, or she's used to sort of making it work. So like she never thought that the emissary would be this human, but it is. So what's it like to be like a religious figure against your will?
Yeah.
Previously on Avatar.
You're absolutely not wrong about Kieran. I think that's an important part of, one, that's telling us why she was chosen for this position in the first place. And two, I think that's a big part of her character arc through the series. She gets better and better at playing that diplomatic advantage. She never does things easily. It's just, there's always a bit of a resistance, with her. No pun intended. Even with this, she comes in, you see her standing there with Sisko for the welcome. There's always a little bit of a misgiving when she has to deal with Cardassians. And then once these introductions come so smoothly and so, they do their stilted, scripted introductions, and then they're like, I hate doing this stuff. I'm a scientist, not a diplomat. And you see her just sort of like, oh, crud. I like them. I think I like them. Oh, they seem chill. And she says, I'm a friend of anyone who favors peace. Like she's definitely willing. True. She's willing. She's not eager, but she's willing. And I also thought it was interesting on that note that the other major character interacting with the Cardassians and working with them is O'Brien, who is very, we've known him to be, he's a war veteran who has a thing against the Cardis, as he calls them.
Yes, that's true.
And so, his tendency to be a little, abrasive at times himself, as well as working with the Cardassians, accidentally almost got him, put him in an awkward position.
The scientists are, you're right that they're softer than the military Cardassians, but they're still pretty hard. They could take you.
Oh, yeah.
Without question. Some of those scenes with O'Brien and Galora, they seemed a little gender swapped to me. I don't know if you felt that way. She demands he makes her tea that one time. At the last scene, she kisses O'Brien on the cheek, and it struck me as a very Kirk thing to do. I don't know.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
I want to poke at that. Why aren't there more men? Why are they thought to have a deficiency in the STEM fields? Does it mirror Earth? Were they the ones who did all the legwork on early computer systems, and then the females came in and were like, no, ladies, we got this. And then now you just have no men in coding? Is that what's going on?
Well, let's remember that the original coders were women.
That's what I'm saying. What I'm saying. Was it gender swapped on Cardassia? were the original coders there, purposely the inverse gender dynamic.
It did make me think Cardassian society does seem very rigid according to gender. There have certainly been women on Cardassian military ships. I sort of believe that the Cardassians would just sort of arbitrarily and strangely decide that, like, this is for this gender and this is for that gender, and you can apply for exceptions if you want. Don't bother me. I'm bribable. Thank you. We just did The Wire, where there's the bribery scene.
I love that episode. I just recently rewatched it.
That's
so that I can because I saw that in the episode list. It was like, oh yes. It was probably a mistake for me to watch The Wire just before watching this episode, because when Dajar comes in, I'm like, this is too obvious. She's a decoy. The Obsidian Order wouldn't mess up that badly.
You know what's weird about the Obsidian Order is everyone's afraid of them. And yet, in this situation, the two good scientists sort of turn her over in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? Because, like, to parallel it again with the Soviets, like, I'm trying to imagine, like, two Soviet scientists being like, well, this guy's KGB, and he screwed it up. They can't go home now.
I mean, but maybe they can, because they succeeded in spite of everything else. And that maybe when they go home, the success will overshadow that.
I mean, it might be that Ulani and Gilora are just, like, they just have that much clout.
Well, Gilora claims that her bosses can protect them.
That's right. So okay, I missed that part. I forgot that part.
So this suggests that the scientific field is it has its privileges, even over the military in some.
That's saying something.
I mean, it makes sense, though, because I keep, like, trying to think, one of the things about the Cardassians that I enjoy so much, aside from them being the bitchiest, is the simple fact that they are this, what you would normally think of as a contradiction in terms, right? They're so prissy and yet so brutal. They're like Hannibal Lecter in that way, right? Like, everything has to be perfect and efficient and precise. And so, I mean, it kind of makes sense that their science department, you know, you if you want to wage a precise war, you need to have precise instruments of war. And you're only going to get those from, like, you're not going to, no one's going in with, like, a club. Like, no, they want to be able to take you apart at the cellular level, so that way you're awake for the whole thing, right? Like,
there's probably a comparison that could be made to just U.S. militarism. Like, our military isn't just brute force. There are other larger nations. I mean, USSR was one famously. The People's Republic of China, like, a major tactic of theirs is just throwing people at it and just throwing more people. We put all of our money and all of our tax budget into military technology. We have, we boast, some really advanced stuff, and we always, like, that's one of our big advantages in war.
It's interesting to watch Avery Brooks in this. I remember reading in season 2, they did some audience focus group research. And what they found is that the audience liked Sisko, but they felt he was too low key. And that's a remarkable adjective to put on Avery Brooks.
Yeah,
I kind of see it here.
Wait, someone watches any of his performances and thinks he's low key? He is perpetually, to me, Jiffy Pop. At any moment, you're just shaking him slightly. You're not doing a lot to him, but any moment, Jiffy Pop. Like, there's always so much simmering under the skin of his performances. I can't imagine anyone looking at anything he does on this show and been like, well, he's just kicking back. Like, no, he's not.
He's always simmering, you're right. Like, as soon as the moment gets tense, suddenly he's punctuating his volume and his words.
But even, I mean, it's not even when it's tense. Like, anytime he's just excited about anything, it's like he's just an action potential waiting to fire all the time.
This is an episode where he's doing a lot of considering before he's acting, and a lot of questioning, consideration, and getting challenged too. I mean, like, one moment that provoked a from me was his conversation with Odo, and Odo was his observation of things was like, their agenda is making them see this, and your agenda is leading to you approaching it this way. And Sisko's like, I don't have an agenda. All humanoids have an agenda. Right. His agenda is that these are wormhole aliens and not prophets. His agenda is that there's no divinity at play here, and he's forced to question it.
I actually have a problem with what Odo said.
Yeah.
About how he's like, I don't have an agenda. You have an agenda. Like, everyone has an agenda about all things at all times. Odo.
Odo's agenda is fascism.
I know, right?
Odo's a cop. Like, I think everyone has come to acknowledge this. Odo's agenda is just a bit too much order.
And this is not the first time he's pulled this shit. Like, there was a recent episode where he's like, I've found that humanoids, when things get desperate, they can do the most terrible things. Oh, really, Odo?
Oh, really?
Just humanoids?
Yeah.
Right?
Your people right now have enslaved an entire quadrant, but it's just humanoids who have this.
And we don't need to talk about that time that that flashback we get to see of his horribly handling a case during the occupation on Terok Nor.
It's like sitting in an internet forum and having someone who has absolutely no skin in the conversation going on being like, I'm the only objective person here. Like, no, you're not. You're here. You're just as subjective as the rest of us. Like, wanting things to go well and wanting things to succeed is, in fact, an agenda.
I don't care, and therefore I'm completely objective.
Exactly.
Also, my agenda is to keep aloof and distance myself from the pettiness here that I see.
And drool over Kira.
Oh, God. Anti-ship.
On the one hand, I cannot blame him, because I, too, am drooling about Kira. On the other hand, at some point, Odo should really just morph himself a trilby and call it a day.
Gonna provoke the Odo stance out there.
That sounds like a bonus episode right there.
Making friends and influencing people the Karen way.
That's very Cardassian of you, Karen. I have conflicted feelings about, and I'm sure I talked about this last time, about religion and about how religious subjects are handled in DS9. On the one hand, for the most part, I like it because it's a sociological perspective that tends to get sort of tamped down in sci-fi, but like rather deliberately in Star Trek historically, because Gene Roddenberry, like when he, his original vision was that we were beyond religion at that, by the future.
Right.
And so they sort of stuck to that for a good while, and then DS9 comes along. It's like, nope, it's going to be a major part of what's going on and what the dynamics are, what the tensions are, and the cultural shifts and trauma and recovery for the Bajorans. And that makes more sense to me because religion, or at least the sort of behavior that tends to follow spiritual religion, is such an inherent part of, at least of human society, of real world societies, that we can't just up and ignore it entirely. Can't just write it off entirely, because unless we're really hanging a lampshade on it to say, like, these aliens don't have that aspect to their psychology, that they don't follow something in a cult-like fashion. Even non-religious people in the real world, if they're not putting that aspect of their psychology into a religious faith, a lot of times they're going to find something else to rally behind, whether it's a political figure, some demagogue, or the more toxic side of atheism feels a lot like religious fundamentalism. Like, it's just sort of something that happens. The aspect of religion in DS9, I love that aspect of it. I don't like when they play it too straight, and especially later in the series.
I think science fiction, certainly people from all over like science fiction and Star Trek, but when atheism was less popular, it was sort of a haven for like secular humanists and people who were done wrong by religion in the 70s and 80s especially.
That's true.
I think it was sort of remarkable in the oddies that Adama was an atheist. And I don't think people would think of that as remarkable now. The impact of religion on people is important to explore.
Are either of you familiar with the book Hogfather by Terry Pratchett?
Oh, yes. It's one of the few I've actually read.
In this book, the quick version of it, his version of that Santa has gone missing. Mm-hmm. And Death, who is the anthropomorphic personification of death, is a giant skeleton, becomes Santa so Christmas can happen, because if Christmas doesn't happen, the sun will not rise. And at the very end of it, he gives this speech to his granddaughter, Susan, I swear it makes sense in context, that you need to believe. She's like, well, what happens if you hadn't done it? Oh, well, then a glowing ball of, hydrogen would have raised in the sky. Well, you're saying that nothing would have happened, like everything would have been fine. It's like, no, people need stories to be people. We need to teach kids little lies so that way they can grow up to, understand the big ones. And she's like, well, what big lies? And she's like, truth, justice, that sort of thing. She says, well, those aren't lies at all. And he says, well, grind everything up to its smallest particle, put it through the sieve, and show me one atom of justice. And so I kind of think the idea of trying to, and of course, Pratchett was a scathing atheist, but he had a lot of really good takes on religion and the idea of myth and the power of myth and the ability of stories to impact culture. And I think the idea of trying to make a world that has moved beyond religion is foolhardy, because we needed those stories at one point. I see some stuff online now. It's like, we've been pushing kids into STEM fields for so long that no one has any humanities training. And humanities training is what tells you maybe bringing the dinosaurs back from the dead is not a great idea. You need a little bit of everything, even if you're not going to be fundamentalist about it. To be a well-rounded human being, you need to understand where you came from. And we came from these stories. Now, that said, the dude who writes the horoscopes just came in and said, you can't do this because I saw something in my tea leaves this morning. And then you're like, well...
This episode interests me. I never quite like this view of religion where you stare at, quatrains for 500 years. Because it just seems like you know what? Last week on the show, we covered The Collaborator. And in The Collaborator, Vedic Bareil has a vision. And I sort of, Vedic Bareil, a very muted character, not very interesting most of the time. But there is one moment in that episode where he has this vision, and he wakes from it, and suddenly Kira comes in, and he knows he has to tell the lie that will save Kai Opaka's reputation. And it's like, that one scene, you can kind of see it. Like, this is what it's not about text. It's about sort of these things which resolve into meaning and guidance for you. For this guy, for Vedic Yarka, it seems to be just about the text.
He's probably the least developed, to me, character and aspect of the episode, because he's just one note. He could be a more extreme stereotype of just coming in, fire and brimstone, and only having that note. I mean, but it was an interesting and pleasant surprise at the end that it was an interesting one, because he's explicitly said, he is defrocked. He is effectively he is ex-clergy, excommunicated. He was the leader that that generally means he's the leader of some fringe, unorthodox faction. And yet the episode ends with Sisko strolling down the promenade with him, getting his input on further prophecies. That's fascinating. That would be interesting. It would be interesting to hear the what's the other side? What is the viewpoint and the approach to the texts and the prophecy that the mainstream and the orthodox believes, or at least subscribes to, that he railed against it and was excommunicated. I want to know what factors pushed him out, and what viewpoint is going on there, how they're dealing with prophecy, as opposed to this one guy who shows up and is like, there's a prophecy and I believe in it and you need to not do this. Why? Because it says so. And an actual theologian probably has lots of sources, to cross-check and cross-reference and compare and say this is why I would think there is an academic approach to theology. Instead of just blind faith, which is how he's being portrayed.
Especially if you're going to look at the Bajorans as being, space Judaism. You have generations upon generations of not even just writings, but oral traditions and scholarship and arguments. And the fact that, what did this guy really have to do in order to get kicked out?
I would have loved to have seen more between him and Kira, because Kira is someone who is a believer. She's shown herself willing to listen to to other viewpoints, and to consider it, even if she comes out the other end of it, still unmoved in her belief.
Well, apparently, he was defrocked for leading protests against the Vedic Assembly for the Cardassian peace treaty. But you know what impressed me about him, though? Like at the end, when he was wrong, he said that he was wrong,
That's
which I
true.
kind of subconsciously expected him to double down.
Well, that I think is probably the difference between an atheist or an agnostic person. I don't know that I get to make this delineation, but that's, I guess, the difference between the faithful and a follower.
Right.
You know, he is willing to set himself, as Captain America said, by the river of truth, and say, I will not move any further. Like, he's like, this is my understanding, and while the words are not wrong, I was the problem.
Yes.
I have more to learn, which is just kind of a better indication of his, faith and his devout following of said faith.
Well, that's the difference between him and Kai Wynn, I guess.
Yes.
Oh, Space Karen.
Louise Fletcher, rest in peace.
Oh, my child.
I had no idea she was Nurse Ratched, and it makes so much sense now.
Right?
Doesn't it? Yeah.
And she was probably like the sweetest human being on the face of the planet. Made cookies, sweaters for goats, just the nicest lady. And then on a dime, she can turn on and be like, I am the most evil human being alive.
Yeah.
Well, it's because she keeps the sweetness. She channels that and channels it into just a sinister. I love. There was one short play I got to direct that involved a serial killer, and I definitely had someone like Louise Fletcher in mind in terms of like, take this sweetness, like cast a really nice guy in the role. And it was like, because he's so nice, his idea of evil was very sinister, and I was like, I need you to keep your niceness. I need you to stick with it.
Yeah. Any last whacks at the bat for Destiny?
I've been watching a lot of television that's been made through COVID. I've seen some live theater. And this show is so claustrophobic in its acting. Can you imagine standing next to the human Jiffy Pop that is Avery?
Yeah.
And you need to be like within like 3 inches of his face in order to make yourself so you're like in the shot. It's just there's
TV
so
rules.
much very intense close talking.
And that kind of fits, this is the diplomat Star Trek. And that's the diplomat's way.
I think it's very exciting that we get to talk about this particular episode the exact same week that NASA blew up an asteroid.
Yeah! We smashed it up. Totally destroyed.
Now my question is, what space prophecy did we just fulfill, and what's going to happen now that we've thrown off some sort of gravitational field that is now out of flux?
An observation as I'm watching the episode was like, I feel a little called out on my flirting techniques here. Also, quote written down, I assure you I am quite fertile.
Yeah.
Girl, get it.
That was the best.
Get it, girl.
Right?
Like,
shoot your shot.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites on here is Morn!
Right.
Because he was sick from the bad
Canar.
We have not seen much of Morn in this series. I'll have to rectify that.
He never shuts up, That's what he can't have him in too many scenes. He just dominates it with the dialogue.
This reminded me, when I was younger, I used to worry about a lot of stuff. And one of the things I was worried about was that Nostradamus had predicted the end of the world.
Oh, that's right.
I think everyone has everyone has a dinosaur phase and a space phase. And then at the Scholastic Book Fair, there is inevitably some book. Kids, ask your parents about this Scholastic Book Fair about Nostradamus and prophecy. And we all have this little tiny window where we're all wearing tinfoil hats. And
see, I was busy. I was reading tarot cards at that point, so I'm just doing card reading. I don't have any bad vibes about this. Y2K is going to be fine.
And I feel like the prophecy here kind of feels like a Nostradamus quatrain. But this is the famous quatrain that I found because my stepdad had a translation of Nostradamus.
Nice.
The year 1999, 7th month. From heaven will come a great king of terror to bring back to life the great king of, and then a misspelling of the Mongols. Before and after Mars to reign by good luck. And so I was like, okay, how about this? The 7th month of 1999 We're going to find out if there's anything to this Nostradamus guy. And the 7th month of 1999 happened. The world did not end. And I was much relaxed by that. I think this was kind of a late 90s fad.
Yeah. What you just read, I'm like, oh, I remember this. I remember the documentaries. I remember the talk about, like, oh, but Nostradamus said there would also be, like, war in the Middle East. And everyone being like, there's always war in the Middle East. Cultural crossroads.
Right. Just to give you an example of how this stuff works, later on I went to, like, a Nostradamus website to figure out, like, what happened. And what this one Nostradamus fan had figured out was that Quatrin did not refer to the end of the world, but I guess there was a giant statue of Genghis Khan that was unveiled during the 7th month of 1999. Okay. So you might have thought it was the end of the world, but really it was just this giant Genghis Khan statue. Easy mistake to make.
I mean, yeah.
So Nostradamus is always right. Remember that. And you're always wrong.
Even in the after facts, where we can just...
Oh, what a delightful stroll down memory lane that was. 1999 was such a weird year.
Battlestar Galactica, Kobol's last Gleaming. It's bad news for Laura Roslin, who is expected to die in 6 months. As she tries to prep Vice President Baltar, the fleet encounters a planet that seems to be Kobol, birthplace of humankind, just like Leoben foretold in Flesh and Bone. Surrounded by signs from the beyond, Roslin decides that their lives are being guided by the gods. She asks Starbuck to go against Adama's orders and use the Raider to jump to Earth and recover the famous artifact, the Arrow of Apollo, which is foretold can lead you to Earth. Starbuck refuses until Roslin breaks it to her that Adama is lying about knowing the location of Earth. Betrayed, Starbuck takes the Raider, leaving Adama shocked. What do you think of Kobol's Last Gleaming, Part 1?
Oh, God, I don't even know where to start. Karen, you go.
It was such an interesting way the episode started with the intercutting of all of the different places and locations to kind of bring us where they all were. Yeah. And I remember being legit shocked. I was not expecting that to be Gaia's Baltar in her bed. I was like, oh, this is clearly we're doing different times and places and things. And there's Lee fighting with his dad. And there's Lee fighting with Kara. And then, oh, God, there's Baltar. Oh, God. And so that's how I started this episode, being like, oh, sweet chocolate, no.
Yeah, I always forget that Baltar had a brief fling with Starbuck, and then I think I try to forget it on purpose because
it's a weird dynamic.
I don't know. I just want better for Starbuck. I don't know.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Starbuck never really pretended it was anything other than just just sex. I think even in any in any of her reaction to Baltar's overtures to her, she's just like, I mean, if you wanna, all right, It's gotta wound your pride when your partner calls someone else's name in bed, one way or another.
Is that the kind of thing that actually happens, or does that just happen in TV?
From personal experience, that's not something that I've ever felt at risk at.
Yeah, it seems like a TV thing.
Yeah.
I've been tracking the dates. This is day 50.
Yes.
Day 50 since the fall. And last week's episode, Colonial Day, with the party and the dance, happened day 47. So this is 3 days after that. And, I have to say that as much as this probably sucks for Lee, Starbuck is correct. She did not make any commitments to him just because she dressed up pretty and danced that one time. Yeah.
I mean, if anything, keeping in line maybe with her being a gender-swapped character originally written as a man, she and occupying a very masculinized space as a hotshot ace fighter pilot character, But we're a dude, no one would think twice about him just being like, oh, no, it's just sex.
That was just pillow talk, baby.
Yeah.
I'm sure I've said this before, and I know it's a horrible thing to say, but I love the fact that Starbuck can take a punch.
I love that she can take and give a punch.
Yeah, the role that boxing plays.
That is something that I noted too. In my notes, and that's something that stood out to me is that the Another parallel I'm drawing with our DS9 episode is fight flirting, um, just for different reasons and motivations. Watching the rest of the scene play out, like, that intensified the moment for me. I suddenly, like, I leaned forward a little more, like, oh, they did that, but it wasn't. Oh, that's uncomfortable. Like, there was nothing about it that felt particularly problematic. Like, the social dynamics felt like they'd hit the right note to set up that moment.
It's not gendered violence.
Yeah.
Right.
He's got testosterone on his side. He's definitely got the upper hand physically, but she's leveled the playing field enough, you know, like in terms of the psychology and the social exchange between them.
We get that from Adama talking to Lee.
That's true.
Right.
You pull your punches. Like,
You gotta lose control.
are doing this as if you're sparring.
It really does work. It brings out, I mean, Almost looks great boxing. Apollo looks great boxing. Kara looks great punching people. It's all working for all of them.
I am really curious as to what is more challenging for an actor, to be in some sort of love or sex scene, or to be alone in front of a camera and have to put even a prop firearm anywhere near your face. Like, I just...
Yeah, I'd rather do the sex scene.
I was surprised how heavy that landed. The sort of suicide ideation from Boomer, and the attempts from Boomer.
That actress, her ability to remain so open and vulnerable and in such a dark, like, I was just completely taken out of the story to just watch her as a performer.
I felt like I was sort of seeing Boomer for the first time in a way. And when you go to that scene of her with Tyrell, in particular, like, they really look more invested, and you feel for them more, to me, than any time when they were actually together. And I think there's reasons for that. The talent of the actors being, you know, the primary one. It is known, you know, Grace Park went into sort of acting boot camp training throughout the first season.
No kidding.
And boy, does it show. The Chief is more, like, he's more dramatic than Boomer. Boomer is, like, trying to keep it cool and low stress at all times. And that means that you don't really see her break until she's already broken. And I think you can see that here when in that bed.
Yeah, because she's already trying to sweep it under the rug. It adds another layer of tension between them, because it's not really resolved. You know, you can break it off and call it over. It's not over. Like, they can't walk away.
Right.
Nobody can move away. They have to continue to work alongside each other. They're living in close quarters. There's not too many other people around them to, you know, like, they can't lose themselves in another crowd.
And yet, like, she actively dismisses him, you know? She's like, "Thank you for coming out, Chief. You're dismissed." Yeah. And Tyrell sort of salutes sadly.
Yeah, sad like, salute.
It is true, like, you still have to see each other, but you also can't really be there for someone who's going through a rough time if you ended it, right? Like, the Chief can't really sweep in. I mean, she first, she doesn't want him to sweep in.
Yeah.
But like, there's just nothing to do but leave and, like, pretend you don't notice. It's really sad.
It's the part of relationships that I think gets overshadowed a lot in fiction and in real life, that sometimes love is just not enough to keep people who love each other together. And you don't necessarily have to be completely anti-feeling about another person to just not want to be in a romantic relationship with them anymore. And it could be for any multitude of reasons. And I mean, even if, you know, it's just a matter of this isn't working, or, you know, our, you know, desire levels for companionship or whatever are not on the same way. I mean, these things don't just shut off.
No. I mean, there can still be. I'm thinking of, you know, an ex-boyfriend of mine who we've still, you know, there's still an affection between us. Right. I think I would tear his face off if we started dating again. Never mind that. Like, it's, you know, not that it's even a risk, but, like, there's still that sense of, like, you know, he can already anticipate, just, you know, based on, like, Facebook activity, you know, some post or other. He'll know if I'm taking something badly, and he'll check in. There's still that affection. There's just also there's the the wound that has to heal over too, and how that heals and what the process is. And this is still pretty raw here.
Yeah.
Extremely.
One of my favorite ways to describe another fictional character is he is the best ex-boyfriend ever because he is loyal, he knows you, he is there for you, but you don't have to put up with his bullshit anymore.
Yeah, I did not remember this episode very much, but I was kind of knocked over by how drawn in I was this time. You know, it's come up on the show. Sometimes people say the style of Battlestar reminds me of The Office now. Huh. Nothing this week reminded me of The Office at all. This was like a indie film or like a sad French movie in the best sense.
I think the closest we get to The Office is Baltar trying to have 2 consecutive conversations with 2 women who don't interact with each other.
Yeah.
I have a note about that called, it says Metal Gear Baltar. I've only ever seen one of my roommates play Metal Gear Solid, and my job was to let him know if he was out of ammo or if there was a checkpoint coming up.
Oh, that's
but there was
useful.
this one fight scene where, like, you're getting ready to go into some sort of a boss, and suddenly, like, his girlfriend comes over his thing. He's like, Jack, do you remember when we were getting married? And it's like, no, we don't have time for what I'm about to go to. There's a level boss right there. And that's all I could think of was like, he was every time Baltar was like, no, I don't have time for this cutscene right now. Can we not do this cutscene right now? I have something else to do. And then yet he goes and like Six just smacks his head against the mirror. Like, his head Six was so interesting. She's the exact opposite of what we were just praising in Trek about religious faith not becoming one's identity. And she is nothing if not that. And she tries to couch every feeling she has with righteousness. And of course, you never get past the idea of, is she really a chip in his head, or is he really just that fundamentally broken as a human being that he's disassociated because of that he's a terrible person? Baltar is a terrible person. By great character, fabulously acted.
Extremely dangerous
Terrible
narcissist.
person. Yes.
Yeah.
Now, you know, if I was going to say, when your friend is depressed, you should not do anything Baltar does in this episode. What did you get from Baltar in that scene?
Oh, God, so much awkwardness. Baltar was really hard to watch in this episode in general.
Extremely.
Man, I don't know. Like, yeah, his chief motivation is usually self-preservation.
Yeah.
But he also
This time
has
it
to
was
listen to
like
Granger.
Preservation of his ego, this episode.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
And his pride.
That's true.
Yeah.
I need to regain control.
Everyone should want him. Everyone should listen to him.
Yeah. You know what I thought was gross? At the end, he kissed her on the forehead, and something about like a sex pest like kissing you on the forehead.
It's the exact antithesis of the sweet kiss on the cheek O'Brien gets.
Yes, yes. I watch him do it, and it's like, that's got to be fake. He can't really be feeling those emotions. He really wants to sleep with her.
He doesn't actually feel tenderness. Like I don't think people are people to Baltar for the most part. They're just a means to an end.
Exactly.
They're tools and ways to gain advantage and power and self-satisfaction. This feels right to me in the moment to do because maybe it's like it paints a pretty picture of myself to myself. It feels very dramatic to do. I'm going to do it.
He's got a very strong sense of just childlike id. Like, he's all about gratification now, not really about thinking long term. And it's not a stretch to see a character like him be so fundamentally socially flawed that he can only equate intimacy with sex. He just can't relate to people. And so the only way he can get close to people is by fucking with them or just fucking them in general.
Yeah,
but I don't want to make him like, oh, poor Baltar, because, screw that guy.
Right.
He seems uninterested in engaging with people. And that's really, that's the failing right there. That's where he steps into villainy, where he doesn't want to care for people. He has no interest in the what could be fulfilling, the fulfilling aspect of tenderness of human affection.
You remember what he said in the pilot? Guilt is for little men.
Ugh.
Yeah.
He must be so much fun to play.
I think we see slightly new sides of both Baltar and Six in this. I always appreciate getting to talk to you. I know you're defenders of Six. Caitlin and Chris, friends of the show and friends of you as well, said on the show recently, like, we're kind of tired of watching Baltar get his dick spanked. And I think this is a little bit more than that. I don't think the dick spanking exactly stops, but I think it gets more complicated.
It definitely escalates. Both of these shows are kind of dealing with like predestination and whether or not you have control over your actions. Like, if she exists, trying to decide if Six is really in there or if she's just a very sexy Jiminy Cricket who he has invented to live in his head. I don't know. I mean, it's very clearly something's telling him to either be better at being a bastard or stop being a bastard altogether.
I've been paying more attention to Silent Occupied Caprica, and the Sixth there, who's watching Hilo, is like, I really admire those humans. They feel things so intensely. I wish I could feel things as intensely as humans do. And it kind of makes me wonder if she's like, the whole idea in these last few episodes has been the Cylons sort of treasure pain because it brings them closer to humanity. And maybe this is another facet of that for Six. Like, I'm going to live through this jealousy. I'm going to experience it.
It's a very Catholic approach to her righteousness. Extremely. This is a cleansing. This is an elevating sort of suffering. But when they're having their conversation walking through the city on Caprica about Hilo, being in love with Boomer, and just this like conversation about humans and humanity in that regard, along these lines that you're talking about, and the idea of being so in love with someone that it hurts. And you see her, like, we're seeing close-ups of her just, with her brow furrowed and just looking rather pained herself, and just being like, oh yeah, that's weird. I wonder what that's like. It's like imagine just going about your business, doing your work of, conquest and subjugation, and then suddenly being like, oh God, I'm sinking to the cloud and my heart hurts.
Right. It's you got to defrag the hard drives before you experience this feeling some more.
Yeah.
Let's go finally to sort of Roslin and religion and prophecy here. Now, before we do this, I wanted to drop sort of a factoid. When you watched this, did your version include the opening theme song that has words?
No.
It was the instrumental opening?
It would like the singing, the voices, but not...
Okay, you had the voices.
Yeah.
I was watching on the DVD, and mine does not have the words. The reason that those two versions are there is that the American network said that the words made the opening song too sad. So they insisted that they replace it with an instrumental song that did not have words and was therefore less sad.
Words make us sad. Americans don't want words.
One of many random and strange creative fights behind the scenes of Battlestar Galactica. But then in season 2, they had enough clout to say, all right, I don't care how sad it makes the Americans. We're using the full version. And that's how it should be.
It does certainly have sort of like a funeral, sort of a dirge to it.
Oh, yeah.
There's a reason for that. I recently found out that it was from the Gayatri Mantra, from Hindu religion.
Fascinating.
It is a prayer. It's in Sanskrit. And you can find various translations of it online, but it is straight up a prayer.
Well, now I feel like we've been culturally insensitive for so many years,
Right.
and I didn't even know it. I am so sorry.
I'm sure they sort of well-meaningly said, well, let's put some Eastern religion content into a predominantly Western show. But it's I feel like it would be now this sacred prayer is now as well remembered as like a cheesy sci-fi TV show called Battlestar Galactica.
That's the thing, right?
So-
Like, I didn't realize it had like actual cultural significance. And then, of course, like the idea of, well, we need it to sound exotic. Like, that just,
Right.
I'm really deeply uncomfortable with that. All right.
I don't get that vibe. My immediate point of comparison that comes to mind now knowing this is Firefly. Firefly, the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, this is entertaining, but at the same time, it's really grating on me how much Chinese culture is being used in this without prominent Chinese people, especially since like the groundwork was there for like any of those prominent families, like River and like the Tams,
Yes.
with their surname and everything, like they should be Chinese. They should if we're showing this culture to dominate the galaxy, the people in power should be of that culture. And it felt like it was used very flippantly and used for flavor, like throughout, and it just like that for me, like that's when I hold up as, you know, an example of like pretty problematic usage. I don't find this as problematic because it's being used with an intent of gravitas. They're not taking a sacred hymn and making like, you know, a jazz rendition of it. They're taking it and putting it in a heavy, somber purpose. Like, you know, it's a sacred song that's being used to evoke a sacredness, a sanctity.
There's something about those particular notes and that particular pitch that you can't, like, that's just the emotion.
Yeah.
It brings up.
It's a wail. It's a long, like 1 minute cry.
When I hear, you know, the idea of it making America sad, I'm like, it doesn't sound sad to me. It sounds
right.
It sounds, you know, there's a grimness that you could read in it for me.
I think what it does to sort of Greek religion is very similar, and probably Christianity and Judaism as well. Like I feel like it is trying to pull this sort of religious feeling evoked by a bunch of different religions.
Yeah.
But I think that would certainly be looked on with more skepticism now, at the very least.
I think, especially the question that would be more readily asked today is, who are the showrunners behind this choice?
Right.
Who's choosing
this
it?
Culture.
Yeah. This has always been like the fight of like, if we include it, it's appropriation. If we exclude it, it's erasure. You know.
Yes.
And I think we used to have a conversation about this on Fox and Henhouse. I've always been on the side of inclusion over erasure. You know, problematic representation is still better than none, for the most part, with plenty of exceptions. But that was because you're fighting for good enough. And back then, you know, like even 15, 20 years ago, good enough was, you got a bunch of white people in the room. Hopefully some of them have the right mindset about it and have a cultural awareness that they'll make the right choice. Nowadays, it's, we don't have to settle for the good white person in the room.
Right.
So I think that's where the difference would be for me.
Right. Makes sense. So Laura Roslin has become a believer. What do you think about that?
It's interesting. Roslin and Adama are always just a treat for me to watch on screen. How quiet, how human and grounded their dialogue is between each other, the way they deliver it, the way they exchange, even like there's a lot of pushing back and forth between like a non-believer and a believer in this scene. And it doesn't feel over the top or extreme. There's no fire and brimstone. There's no your God doesn't exist. It's just there's respect and there's pushback, and there's skepticism, with completely understandably. She's just sort of like, I quietly am coming to, you know, believe that this is the truth. This is my truth, you know, and not even believe. Like she's there's a certain her serenity lends it sort of a, you know, I know this is the truth. And Adama, man, you know, like I could see another show having him take a course where he's just like, I'm going to call into question your ability to govern and your sanity and take you out of power. But he doesn't.
Not yet.
No, that's true. That's true.
But think of like the politicking of the religion, right?
Yeah.
There's only like 3 or 4 people who know Rosalind's diagnosis, which means there's only that many of them who know that she's taking this herbal medication that makes her trip her balls off.
True.
But imagine if Adama tried to replace her. That's just a military coup. And if they tried to replace her because of religious reasons, How
That's
many people were on the marker board in the background? Like 57,000 some odd people? You're not going to have group cohesion. He knows he loses. So while I'm not trying to dismiss Adama's empathy or his respect for Roslin, because you're not wrong. Like, they speak the same language, even if they're not agreeing when they do so. You know, and I find
kind of have.
They both kind of see each other.
They're different flavors of the same vibe, and I think they recognize that in each other. You know, it's a small club.
I remember this as, like, when I was watching it, like, my personal least favorite thing in the Battlestar Galactica story. Last week on this show was Colonial Day, and I made sort of a full-throated defense of democracy, you know, because a lot of people have been saying, you know, I don't know if they would go to a democracy. They'd do a dictatorship. And I'm like, hell no. Roslin has kept the democracy. She's fulfilled her oath. So leave it to me, you know. Next week we come to the episode where she makes the most, like, worst decision anyone made in regards to stealing the Raider and going to Caprica. Yet, I am impressed by how they have set this up. Roslin has started to talk more and more about, you know, we don't know what it is in this world. We only have our instincts. We've had several weeks of visions, and we've had, we even have Adama, Mr. Skeptic, at the beginning of this episode going, no, you've got to trust your instincts. It's that thing where she has been so grounded for 12 episodes, and when she makes this leap, like, she leaps. And I'm surprised, you know, being skeptical of this storyline, I'm surprised how much I bought it in the moment.
I do think it's really interesting, and I have the note, the Bible needs more highly detailed pictures like the map of Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Because that's what kind of gets me. Like, she's having all of these ideas, and all right, she's, you know, just tripping. She's, you know, they say there are no atheists in the foxhole. Well, this is a woman who is, as of a couple days ago, now looking down the barrel of her own mortality. So, of course, she's going to start finding gods in places. But then, you know, she gives this detailed vision of what this city that no one else can see looks like. And, you know, the holy lady comes in and you mean, like this?
Right.
And, you know, and I know it's kind of antithetical to, you can't have, if there's proof, it's not faith. But there's proof. It's kind of, I mean, that's kind of good proof.
I think this is a more overtly religious culture than we are supposed to be in America. When they talk about parables and all this has happened before and all that will happen again, you know, they say, I fell asleep in history class. They don't say Sunday school.
I don't know. And I didn't have this opinion. I had to have this opinion showed to me by a friend of mine who is a middling devout Jew. And I was like, I don't understand how that works. And she goes, that's because you're soaking in American default Christianity. There are tons of people in America who do not consider themselves Christian and yet, you know, still don't work on Sundays. Or there are just so many little tiny trappings of Christianity so deeply ingrained in what we see as mainstream American culture. The Simpsons go to church.
Right.
Like, you know, that we don't even bat an eye about that, but it would be a very special episode if, like, the Simpsons went to temple, or, like, you know, it's a very special episode of, what was it, Rugrats had a Passover episode.
Special, yay.
And it's how many other Passover specials are there? There aren't many. How many Christmas shows do we have? We got a lot of freaking Christmas episodes. So I think, I don't know that Caprica, or I don't know that these people in Battlestar are any more or less devout than any of us. I think the genius of it is, much like the genius of DS9 is, well, we're showing you what your background radiation looks like to somebody else.
That's fair. That goes in with the Christian lens idea, because it's not just, do you celebrate Christmas? Do you rest on a Sunday? It's your framework of thinking, of how you conceive of the world around you. Carl, you're mentioning of, you know, the history class line. It makes me think of, I did have a minor in classics, you see. If you think of a culture like the ancient world, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, religion wasn't separate from reality, in the sense of, like, you don't think of of the secular world completely separated from the spiritual world, because it's just all a matter of fact. It's just a part of reality, whether or not you see it, whether or not you choose to worship the gods. They're still there, and if you piss off that river god, you're not going to have water next season. It's not that, do you believe in this god? It's not necessarily a question. It's just, do you want to appease this river?
Right.
It's just an inherent part of it.
Continue to live.
And I mean, that's talking about an animistic, society, like in terms of religion. So that might be a part of their, like Caprican culture in this case. It might just be that much more baked into their sense of the real world. Or it might just be like, I fell asleep in history class and I forgot about the Crusades. That's a real world event with political drives as much as religious, but still relevant.
I was interested what Starbucks said in that conversation with Roslin, where Roslin's like, "Do you believe in the gods?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's how I was raised." Yeah, sure. Both these shows are good at like showing different kinds of religious people.
Yeah.
Starbuck kind of knows to like pull away a little bit, like something's wrong. She's going to get between me and Adama.
It was almost like this is not what I usually have to deal with. This isn't my pay grade.
And you're God now, you say. Ooh. We should praise Mary McDonnell especially, because don't you love how she's like, "May I tell you the part of the story that I seem to be enacting? I believe I'm the dying leader who's going to lead us all to Earth." Awkward pause. Like, how else can you say that to someone? And it's like the most polite way you could do it. I'm impressed.
It's as understated as she always is, but it's such a big statement to make. Starbuck is just like, what? This isn't. Are you sure I should be here for this conversation? Is it me you wanted to say this to? I'm the guy who shoots things. Is there something? What do I shoot here? Yeah.
Except, of course, she was part of the Leoben prophecy. This was also what I thought of earlier in the show when you talked about how people have a human need for Hogsfathers. Because it's, when you think about it, if 99% of humanity is gone, well, that's when you're starting to write your myths. Like maybe this is a primal instinct as much as it is anything else.
It's interesting, especially in terms of how it works at Galactica, is the idea that they had mere minutes to get away. Mm-hmm. So all they have with them of everything they had, it was what they had in their pockets, right? You didn't get to plan. This isn't like, the Doomsday Seed storage thing where we have this archive. All we have left is what we have on us, and right. It's especially interesting if you look at it like now, people, buying media, but buying it through like, Amazon. Like, I'm going to buy this thing. Well, you don't own that physical thing. That physical thing, that's a digital thing that goes away the moment that database goes away. That all of that stuff, you lost that with Caprica. All we have left are the stories, and so they're going to be imperfect. They're going to be those kids sitting around the fire telling the tale in Mad Max, right? Like, that's all you've kind of got left. And so even history class is going to be wrong, because the only people who are going to be telling the stories are the people left behind to do the telling.
Times of crisis are definitely when you see a spike in religion, in faith, and when people will turn back to that sort of thing, or something, something faith adjacent. Not necessarily. It's not going to make all atheists suddenly into believers, but there's going to be something that your mind just in your spirit is just your soul is trying to cling to. I mean, I can think of times, when one of my grandfathers was dying, like a decade ago. I remember that was the first time I sat and prayed the rosary. I am a lapsed Catholic. I'm agnostic. My relationship with spiritualism and spirituality is always in question. And something that made me realize, just that, that need to do that was an appreciation for the ritual and for the act of it. It was something concrete that I had control over, and it made me feel less lost.
This is the story of people. This is the story of your family in a way. This is culture.
Yeah, it's something that's unifying too. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if suddenly like an extremely fanatical period of history comes out of this for Capricorns.
I mean, that's my favorite definition of the word trauma is the realization that you are not in control of what is going on around you. So the idea of falling into that, well, yes, of course now I have to admit I've never successfully prayed the rosary.
It takes a long time.
Tough.
I don't even know that I would necessarily know how.
I mean, well,
which is terrible.
Listen, Karen, I Googled the rosary routine, and it turned out to be simpler than I realized, because the whole idea of it is that you're going into a trance. You just pray over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You just lose track of time. It's like
knitting.
giving up control to get control. Spirituality is a fascinating thing to me. So this has been fascinating.
I'm impressed by how they have brought this story about. Like, in a way, they have the humans are sort of deciding to tell their own story anew, and that makes a lot of sense. But I'm also watching this in 2022. I can't help feeling a little bit like also that they're falling under the spell of QAnon or something too. Do you know what I mean? If I was in the fleet and President Roslin started talking like this, I would be like, no, you kept it together so well. Good God.
That Tyra Banks, I was rooting for you.
I mean, crisis of some sort is also what leads to the rise of demagogues and dictators. It's this little bitty line. You step over to it and suddenly everyone's just mindlessly following it. Because that gives them a sense of direction. And like we're not quite, the herd of wildebeests, just going off in one direction on the slightest provocation. We're not that far from it as a species. We just don't like to admit it.
No.
I mean, that's what makes Yarka from DS9 as kind of cool as he is, because it would have been really so easy.
Oh, to just
have made him the gnashing. He comes out in like his hair shirt, gnashing of teeth, rending of garments. Like it would have been so easy to do that.
Now, I don't know if I mentioned before, I've only seen as far as the season 2 premiere ever of Battlestar Galactica. Because I initially watched it on Netflix, and Netflix is like, we're taking it off Netflix soon. Yeah, and I was like, crud. And I did actually what I've done this past week was I watched it. I had it in a little small corner of my screen at work, strategically placed. So when this episode started up, I was like, oh no, let's put a window over Starbuck and Baltar here. Oh dear.
This is not a safe for work episode.
Yeah, no, it's been great working from home. This week I've been working from home.
Yeah.
It's been great. I don't have any information going forward past the season 2 premiere, but like watching this is like, it would be really interesting to see Roslin turn into, like a cult figure, a demagogue. If that
sinners in the hands of an angry god,
just becoming this, or like a Joan of Arc, this unifying figure that everybody rallies behind, and whether or not, because she's so quiet, she's so chill.
I know.
It's a serene.
She has
certainty.
a very quiet conviction about her.
Yeah.
She always has. And this is, what you sort of love to hate about Battlestar is like they are good at like making you love a character and then having that character do something that you hate that is perfect for them. And it's like,
except for Baltar.
Baltar.
That's just Baltar. You're just there.
Oh my god, Baltar's so hard to watch.
Yeah.
It's so awkward.
We don't have to. It is so awkward. I love this episode. I love this talk. We could talk about this episode for forever. This is episode 13. 12 times before, I have asked our guests the question, which episode wins this week, Battlestar or Deep Space Nine? 6 times they have said Battlestar. 6 times they have said Deep Space Nine.
Oh no, this is too much pressure.
I don't want this kind of pressure.
This one show could win today and the finale next week. Or it could be a split, and there would be an honorable tie. No one knows what's going to happen, but it's time now to eliminate one of those possibilities. On the theme of prophecies, who wins? Battlestar, Deep Space Nine?
I don't think it's fair to ask that question, because it's a 2-part
unfair.
episode.
Yeah.
It's a 2-part episode, and we, just in terms of straight up prophecy.
Straight up prophecy.
I see that it's a difficult comparison also because the Battlestar episode has had the entire season to build it up.
Right.
Whereas the DS9 episode only has the space, for the most part, has the space of its episode to really, like, there's been more minimal setup.
I mean, they've mentioned all season that he's
the emissary. Yeah,
and
sure,
that he was
fair.
prophesized and whatnot. But yeah. See, I almost want to say DS9 for a completely, like, ridiculous reason, that I think the prophecy itself, the wording of it, is much more poetic.
It's true.
You know, the three vipers.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
And the temple will be destroyed. That's very evocative.
Yeah.
I think for me, so an angle I think I'll take for this then to consider this. A lot of the debate between the skeptical and the mundane versus the divine, the mystical, the prophetic in BSG is going to be, like, it's more diffuse. It's sort of sprinkled out with, you know, these other the other stakes and goals at hand. And in this episode, they're like, now it's going to be much more overt in terms of, like, we need to do this thing because it was written. DS9, I think what I really liked about DS9's approach to the prophecy is it's just so many conversations, so many questions, so many, like, it's just Sisko sitting there and just like, I want to hear all thoughts on this. I want to hear angles. I want someone to, you know, Odo's going to challenge me on this. Kira's going to, you know, put the emissary pressure on me. And you have Fire and Brimstone Priest who's not actually all that Fire and Brimstone. Like, I think I'm leaning DS9.
Deep Space Nine wins. Congratulations. I'm going to enter a minority report for Battlestar. Simply because this whole episode just really bowled me over. You know, we have had in this season, there's a lot that has happened in a very small amount of time, and there has been no time to reflect. And I feel like this part one is a bunch of reflective throat clearing, and, like, you can kind of see the passage of time for the first time. I just think that the use of the prophecies and the whole sort of prophecy mindset, for lack of a better word, was more fully realized in Battlestar. I'm going to be remembering Kobol's last Gleaming more in 2022 than I was when I saw it in 2005. But Deep Space Nine wins. Congratulations, and thank you for being here on Battlespace 9. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Yes, come to Aresia in January 2023. One way or another, Spock's brain is going down. But also come to see the more grounded performance of the City on the Edge of Forever.
City on the Edge of Forever is on your YouTube channel, I believe.
It's on PMRP's YouTube channel, yes. I'm at Hollywood Fat Cat on Twitter.
And I am at Older Than Latvia on Twitter. And mostly there might be a lot of political stuff going on there right now. A lot of reblogging of people who say things that I am feeling in words that are better than the ones I can cobble out of my head. So yeah, you can come and read it or talk at me on Twitter.
And PMRP is PMRP.org. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
That is correct.
Liz, Karen, thank you for being here. Tune in next week for the season finale of Battlespace 9, featuring the episodes Rapture from Deep Space Nine and Kobol's Last Gleaming Part 2 from Battlestar Galactica. And the theme is Visions. For Battlespace 9, I am Carl. Good night.